Thank you, Margaret, and thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Just to give a bit of context about myself, as Margaret said, I'm 24 currently, and I run a company called Shout Out UK. We're a youth news network that tries to get more young people involved in politics using journalism, film, events, and education. And on the educational side, we run a political literacy course, which is accredited by AQA, the exam body. We started off in a couple of boroughs in London. We've now expanded in Dartford, Cambridge, going up to Yorkshire, as well as hopefully we're currently in talks with the NUS, the National Union of Students, to run up a partnership there. So a lot of exciting things. And one of my sort of major sort of campaigns and beliefs is that I think that one thing that society in general, we in a society sort of lack, is that idea of political literacy, because we at the moment somehow have this belief that when we hit 18 we have a light bulb turn on our heads and we understand everything we need to understand about the British political system, or whichever country you're in's political system, and suddenly know how to vote, know what the parties are about, know what this building does, and know how governments and laws are passed, where you wouldn't have the same presumption about maths or English, so why would you have it about politics? So that's just to give you a little bit of a sort of background about myself and where I'm coming from with this. And I'll be slightly brief with some of the other speakers, but I just want to put a couple of comments. One of which is around, so recently obviously there was the US election, shocking result for quite a few people, I think. But I was lucky enough to go to the US Embassy and actually cover the election as it happened. And when I was sort of talking to some of the other journalists and some from LBC, something really stuck with me when they said, and it was sort of at this point when I think a lot of people on the sort of left of centre ground sort of lost hope when sort of Florida came in, and then Ohio, and then it was all sort of nail in the coffin type stuff. And what one of them was saying is that it's not so much that Trump won, it was more that Hillary lost. And what I found quite interesting, if you look at, there was an independent, an article in The Independent quite recently talking about if, hypothetically, if Bernie Sanders actually went up against Trump, what would the result be? And what it got me thinking about is actually what's happening in sort of the small amount of time I've been on this earth. What for me was happening is that it's essentially a absolute revolt on the establishment by people. You know, if you think about it, you can see it in Trump recently, but it happened with Brexit, you know, with the removal of the European Union. It happened with Corbyn in the Labour Party. It happened with the rise of UKIP. It's not so much, in my belief, that this, you know, this rise of ultra-nationalism, that people are suddenly becoming more racist and more sexist, or suddenly a lot of people in America woke up and said, you know what we really need? We need someone like Trump, a real misogynist in power. And it's not so much that. For me, it's more, and from what I'm seeing, it's more about the complete and utter push away of the establishment. That the establishment at the moment, or centrist politics, for a lot of people, they perceive it just doesn't work for them. You see it with, especially my generation, you know, we're at the moment where we're being crippled by rents to the point where we can't actually save up for anything. Housing, I mean, I've just given up the idea of trying to buy a house. Jobs, if you look at, for example, countries like Italy or Greece or Spain or Portugal, you just have no hope if you're a young person, because unemployment's going through the roof for young people, for the next generation. So when you're living in that kind of environment, and you've got no hopes of prospects, you're being blamed for everything because the media constantly attack you. You don't have a hope of moving away from your parents, and when you do to try and start a life for yourself, half of your wage might as well go to your landlord because you've got no other choice. All of that just starts to perpetuate this idea that, well, why would I vote for a Hillary? Or why would I not vote for that anomaly, just to shake things up and see what will happen? Because you think about it, if Hillary did come into power, people know what to expect. It will be the same old, it will be the same kind of environment, it will be the same kind of politics. And there isn't, like some of the other speakers have mentioned, is the idea of trust as well. Now, trust has absolutely collapsed around standard politics and standard political parties. And this sort of came into it quite recently when we, as an organisation, were commissioned by the Economic and Social Research Council of Great Britain to do a load of videos about some research, some academic research that they did. And one of the research topics was about this idea of trust, and that when you look at your local politician, when you've met your local politician, you think of him normally in a decently positive light. You've normally met them, they tend to be a human being, you sort of realise, hold on a minute, it's a person, not what the media tend to describe them as. But then when you look at politics as a whole, there is a virile hatred for politics, or the idea of politics, especially in my generation, where people will just think of politicians as, you know, either money launderers or whatever else. You know, I'm not going to start repeating some of the things because I don't think they're appropriate. But you start to get a sense of how negative that perception of politicians is. And we created this video, and we titled this, you know, Why Do We Hate Politics? And it's this idea of this kind of different perception, and it's that idea, issue of trust, as well as the fact that people are just fed up. And I think it really is quite simple, is that people are just fed up with the way the status quo has been going for several years, for generations in fact. And people would rather vote for someone like Trump, who provides a complete anomaly. He may be good, he may be bad, who knows what he does, but that's the exciting part of why I believe a lot of Americans voted for him, is the excitement of not actually knowing where we're going, because we've been going in a decline for a while. People are relying more on food banks, people are poorer than they have been before. There are a lot more issues now. And yet there's the idea of, if we vote in Trump, yes, he might do some horrific things, but at least we've got the potential of actually making something better, rather than this static sort of constant decline into that kind of void of where we are. And I think if you take it across the pond, you see Brexit, UKIP and the rise of Corbyn are similar reactions. It's not just about the right wing. It's also, you know, what happened with Corbyn is that people are fed up of this idea of the same old Labour Party and that kind of slick Tony Blair-esque style of politician. They saw Corbyn as this alternative, even if he was from sort of the side fringes of politics, and thought, to hell with it, we'll try something different. We've got nothing to lose. Because we're becoming poorer, we're relying more on food banks, the next generation is in trouble, we might as well. What have we got to lose? And I think that is, for a lot of people, the push towards those fringes of politics, whether it be a good thing or a bad thing. It's certainly, I think, first of all, made politics a lot more interesting, and I think that in the long term will be a good thing, because it means that more people are getting engaged, partly because they either really hate the idea of having Trump as the leader of the free world, as you want to call it, but just in general it makes things more interesting. I don't think I've ever seen my Facebook feed, for example, ever have this many discussions, rants or whatever else about politics. People are suddenly becoming more engaged, people suddenly have an opinion. You know, if you look at Brexit, the days after, people were, you know, on both sides of the fringes, massively either excited or terrified. But it's just suddenly made the debate, you know, burst open at the seams to people that have never cared or engaged in politics before. And I think what this has done, the short term, God knows what will happen, but in the long term, I think what it has done is reignited our society to actually engage in politics, because people that I've spoken to, people that I've met that have never cared about politics, that always saw them as liars, bigots or whatever else, are suddenly becoming a hell of a lot more interested. Because those ideas of fringes, it's suddenly like having those debates of the 60s, 70s and 80s, when you had those clashes, and I remember learning about in the history, you had those big clashes between big political ideals of the left and right. And some may see that as a bit destabilising, but for me it's like, it's what makes politics interesting, the idea of actually changing society for one way or another, rather than squabbling over percentage points about how much we should tax for this year and that. That's boring. That has disengaged a lot of people. And that constant idea of how the media have perceived politicians and how the media have essentially related politicians has pushed people away from that topic. So I think actually this, although in the short term can be quite terrifying for some of us more liberal sort of minded, and things that have come out from sort of Trump or some of the Brexiteers is somewhat unsettling, I think in the long term it will really reignite, and it's something that actually we've needed for a while, because these voices, this sort of disenfranchised mass has been growing with unrest, and we're all sort of growing almost resentment for the political class, just because they've sort of been seen as, well, you're in your ivory tower doing whatever it is that you're doing, and because of what you're doing, we're getting poorer, and we're not having any of it. We've seen these different sort of areas of people that are coming up in politics that are from the sidelines and so forth. We're going to give them a chance. We're going to see what happens, shake things up a bit, and hopefully will turn out for the better. It's just, for me, it's actually quite an exciting time, and yeah, that's what I've got to say on that.